What is your go-to creepy or unexplained story? This can be anything from a paranormal encounter, glitch in the Matrix, or even aliens. A real case printed in the British Medical Journal of a woman whose own brain tumor told her where it was and instructed her on what scans she needed to get. There's a paywall on the BMJ site, so the following is the story, copied and pasted from this source. There's more info on there if you want to read more. In the case history, an otherwise healthy woman referred to as A.B. had been living in Britain since the 1960s and was a full-time homemaker when the events described in the article began in 1984. A.B. was reportedly sitting at home, reading, when she heard a voice in her head. The voice reportedly told her, "Please don't be afraid. I know it must be shocking for you to hear me speaking to you like this, but this is the easiest way I could think of. My friend and I used to work at the Children's Hospital, Great Ormond Street, and we would like to help you." A.B.'s response to this voice was about what you would expect. Frightened at what was happening, she tried to ignore the message, but the voice reassured her by providing her with additional information about the hospital she would need to attend. Convinced by this point that she had gone mad, she consulted her family doctor, who referred her to Dr. Ashwani, a psychiatrist. After an examination, which showed no medical explanation for what A.B. had heard, he diagnosed her with a functional hallucinatory psychosis. Along with supportive counseling, she was also treated with thioridazine, and the voices disappeared after a couple of weeks. Unfortunately, the voices returned several weeks later even though she was still taking the medication. This time, the voices were even more specific in directing her to the diagnostic imaging wing of a nearby London hospital. The voices then informed her that she had a tumor in her brain and that she needed a scan for proper diagnosis. They even told her the approximate location of the tumor, her brain stem. Though Dr. Ashwani had found no evidence supporting the presence of a brain tumor, A.B. was distressed enough by this time that he ordered the scan done. This actually took some negotiating, since a computerized tomography test is an expensive procedure, and the lack of any apparent medical justification, aside from a hallucination, made the request hard to fathom. After considerable debate, the scanning was done. Sure enough, the scan showed evidence of a meningioma with a left posterior frontal parafalcine mass extending through the falx to the right side. The neurosurgeon to whom Dr. Ashwani referred his patient gave A.B. and her husband the option of immediate surgery as opposed to waiting for actual symptoms to appear. After weighing the pros and cons, A.B. decided on immediate surgery. The voices were in full agreement. The operation was carried out in May of 1984 with no surgical complications. According to A.B., she heard from the voices one last time after regaining consciousness when she heard them say, "We are pleased to have helped you. Goodbye." No post-surgical problems arose, though she was kept on anti-seizure medication for 6 months after the operation as a precaution. The antipsychotic medication was also discontinued. I had just moved into a new house. One day I was downstairs when I heard what sounded like furniture moving around upstairs. I go up to investigate, but no sounds, nothing is moved. Go back downstairs and it starts again. I go back up, nothing. This went on for about an hour. I almost called the police because I was positive someone was in my home. I ended up calling someone and kept them on speaker phone while I searched the attic and any other place maybe an animal could be hiding, but I never found anything. Eventually I gave up my search and went to bed. That night I had a dream that I was driving to work in the rain and fog and crashed. Someone approached me and asked, "Are you ready to move on?" and I woke up. At the time I was working mid-shift, so around 10 p.m. that same day I get in the car on a foggy and rainy night and make my way into work without any issue. The building I worked in had security cameras all over, and it being so late I was the only person coming in. When I get inside, the person I was relieving asked who I came in with. I was alone, but she swore someone followed me inside. It was a very unnerving 12 hours, to say the least. I've posted this before. Not sure if it's supernatural, but it's definitely creepy. I was hiking through the remnants of a remote, long-abandoned town and the surrounding area. To get to as far into the woods as I was, you had to cross fallen trees over a creek 3 times. I had just crossed the 3rd bridge, and was about 5 miles in and something blue caught my eye just ahead of me. There was a man, in his 60s at least, wearing blue satin pajamas, sitting in a tree. The closer I got to him the louder he laughed. It wasn't a maniacal laugh, but it set off all the alarms in my head nevertheless. He also wasn't wearing any shoes and looked well-groomed/cleaned. I gave him a friendly nod as I passed and he just kept laughing. Then it stopped. I turned and he was gone. There was no branch cracking, plants rustling, nothing. He was just gone. Still rubs me the wrong way. The area I was in was a pretty rough hike, very secluded. Not very many people venture as deep as I was that day. No idea what was going on there. Only mildly creepy, but it still gives me the shivers. I used to work in a small office, about 60 people at max capacity, that had a security guard on duty 24/7. One night, I had to stay super duper late by myself because I had to leave early the next day and needed to finish my workload. All of my other coworkers are gone by around 10 p.m., cleaning crew comes in, and now it's just me and the security guard. The place is dark, but I'm not at all frightened because I'm not scared of most things, the dark, ghosts, etc. The security guard is a really nice dude, and we're in a safe neighborhood. The security guards are required to make rounds every couple of hours just to make sure things are fine. Sometimes they say something to us, most times they don't. Tonight, nice guy security dude stops by my cubicle and asks, "Everything alright?" Big friendly grin on his face per usual. "All good here, thanks." I go back to work. 20 minutes later, he's back again. Big grin. "Everything alright?" "Yup. Nothing yet." And NBSP 20 minutes later. He's back. Big grin. At this point, I am a little creeped out. There is no need for him to come by this frequently, in fact, it's disruptive. I also noticed that the way he interacts with me is always exactly the same, as if I were in a time loop. Same big grin, same intonation, same rhythm of speech. Not only that, I noticed that he whistles the same thing at around the same time, so if I turn off the music on my headphones, I can hear his whistling coming closer before he asks, "Everything alright?" It's around midnight and I'm totally freaked out. I try to rationalize this with myself because I have to get this work done. I'm rushing through my work and I keep hearing that whistling behind me. Surely, he won't come back again. Everything alright? At this point, I'm freaked out because I no longer trust this guy I felt so safe around. I was a young woman in her mid-20s, security guard's a dude in his 50s-ish. I couldn't finish everything, but I wrote an email to my supervisor saying that the security guard is acting very strange and I don't feel safe. I shut everything down, try to rush to the exit. I don't run into the security guard, and just as I'm feeling free and clear, I hear, by now, behind me. He's standing there in the dark hallway, big grin. Just standing there and watching. I mumble something and fucking sprint to my car. The next day, I rush to my supervisor to try to explain what happened the night before. In the light of day, it kind of felt like I might have overreacted, or maybe my mind was playing tricks on me. Turns out, the dude just disappeared. He's missing. I'm pretty sure they still haven't found him to this day. The security guard company just kind of dismissed it as some flaky guy who quit for no reason, and no one seemed to be pursuing it much. He must have been suffering some kind of mental health issue or something, but up until that night, he was just a super nice, trustworthy, reliable security guard that everybody loved. It also felt like some kind of weird paranormal shit because it really felt like something had taken over inside of him. This happened about 2 months ago. I was alone in the house as my parents were away working for the weekend. They were due back that evening when my mom texted me to say that they'd broken down and were awaiting the breakdown service to pick them up. I asked them if there was anything I could do, but they told me to go to sleep as they'd probably be back late. Fast forward to 3 a.m., I woke up to use the toilet. When I left the bathroom, I glanced over to their bedroom and the door was shut and I could see the light on inside. At this point I should note that when I went to sleep, their bedroom door was open and the light was off, so I thought, oh, they must be home. I stumbled towards the door and remember stopping myself, thinking, no, I won't go in, I'll just speak to them in the morning. So I turn back towards my room and go back to sleep. Next thing I know, I'm being woken by the sound of the front door opening downstairs. I glanced at the clock, noting it was 3:45 a.m., 45 minutes after I'd last woken up. I thought it was a bit strange and got a tense feeling in my stomach. I walked out of my bedroom, glanced over to my parents' room only to see the door open and the light off. The bed was also made so no one had been in it. I felt sick. So I went downstairs and nervously asked my mom, "Have you just got home?" She was like, "Yeah, why?" I just sat staring into space wondering what the fuck happened. I'm still wondering now. Didn't experience this firsthand, but I overheard some of it on the phone. My sister was visiting my parents, home from college, for the weekend. I live in my own place the next town over. I called her about something and she was clearly very upset. She told me she was home alone and something was happening, and I asked her if there was someone in the house/an intruder. She told me there were animalistic growling noises coming from the corner and my mom's dog was going nuts on the noise, I could hear him in the background. She said the hallway lights were flashing on and off. I told her to get her jacket and calmly walk out of the house, taking the dog with her if she could, that I would be by soon to pick her up. She went outside and brought the dog with her. Her friend was even closer than I was, so she picked my sister up and they hung out at her friend's house for a while. About 20 minutes after that, my brother, who also lived nearby, stopped by the house to return some tools he'd borrowed from my dad. He went inside because he saw the lights going on and off, and he's an electrician. Once he was inside, they stopped. He kept hearing someone walking around in the other room, but when he'd go in there, no one was there, and when he called out, no one responded. He checked the whole house and then also heard animal growling noises from the same corner as my sister. This is an outside wall corner with windows, not enough space for a raccoon or something to be trapped inside the wall. My brother felt really unnerved and left. My family moved into a new house when I was 11 years old. The previous owners were a family and the mom died of cancer. They sold the house shortly after she passed away. Growing up, my sister and I always had an uneasy feeling about that house. Strange things would happen, but each instance had a plausible explanation, except for this one time when I was 16. In the middle of the night, I was having trouble sleeping. While I was lying there in my bed, the door to my room opened on its own. I could hear footsteps come into my room. I couldn't see anyone, but I felt like someone else was in my room. Ever have someone come up behind you while you're on the computer? Or listening to music and just know they were there without hearing or seeing them? Like that. I could hear the footsteps get closer to my bed. Then, right next to me appeared compression on my bed, like an invisible person was sitting there. I could even feel the weight shift. I reached out to touch the compression and all of a sudden a bunch of blue static electricity shot out from the spot I touched that I screamed and ran out of my room, waking up the entire house. I couldn't explain what I saw that night. Was almost questioning my own sanity, and that's why I don't tell this story often. For the record, I was 100% sober at the time. Also, because I could move, I don't think it was sleep paralysis. The strange thing is that years later my sister ran into the daughter of the previous family. She told my sister that her mom had actually died in the house, not at the hospital. Okay, almost a year ago, a very close family friend, pretty much my uncle, passed away. It really took everyone by surprise. He constantly rode his bike, ate very healthy meals, and made sure to squeeze in some exercise before work. Ironically, he died from a stroke during one of his workouts. A few days after the funeral, I went up to my parents and told them about 2 weeks or so, I had a dream about my teeth falling out. In my culture that means someone is going to die. My mom went on to tell me about a family pic she had taken on her phone that same month. She deleted it as soon as she saw it, because of how much it freaked her out. There was a completely different face on top of hers. As she was telling me, she got very pale. And finally, one of the weirdest, maybe most chilling part out of all this. My dad's dream. My dad and my uncle were very close. They were friends for many years. Heck, the house I grew up in was built by them, for them. My room was supposed to be my uncle's room. A few days before it happened, my dad had a dream he was walking towards this black vehicle parked outside the house with my mom. He said he was like some sort of zombie, mindlessly walking behind my mom, until he saw the driver. It was just some woman, couldn't really see her face, but could tell by the shape. She was waiting for them. That's when my dad snapped out of it and grabbed my mom and ran back into the house. But before he left, he realized my uncle was sitting inside the vehicle. He woke up in a panic. He then continued to have dreams with that same woman, lingering outside the house, until my uncle passed. This happened back in June. I had to renew the registration on my car and decided to do it on my lunch break. That morning, I bought a snack at work and used my personal checking account debit card rather than the joint account card I have with my husband. I had just been paid and I knew my personal checking card had money to cover both the snack and the fees for my renewal. A few hours later, I head over to the DMV. I give the lady my inspection paperwork and last year's registration card and take out what I assumed was my personal checking card. As I hand it over to the DMV lady, I realize the card is actually my card to the joint account. My other card, nowhere to be found. Luckily, I have just enough to cover the renewal in that account and do a quick transfer once I leave so I don't bounce any bills that money was actually intended for. I tore my car, wallet, and desk at work apart looking for my personal checking card because I knew I had it that morning. I even pulled my account up to verify I used it to buy my snack that morning. I figure I must have dropped it somewhere at work or in the parking lot and put a freeze on the card. Get home, tell my husband I lost my card and go to my room to change. Open the door and on the floor in front of my dresser is my missing card. I log into my bank account to verify that I had used it that morning, and again, the charge is there. I didn't come home before going to the DMV, yet there my card lay on the floor. No idea how it got there, still creeped out. My parents' house was brand new in a really nice subdivision, and I was 5 when we moved. I wasn't ever an anxious kid or anything, but I was terrified of the house. I refused to be upstairs alone, and I had really frequent panic attacks. We lived there for 15 years before I moved out, and I was never comfortable. I live in a 75-year-old farmhouse now, and I don't get uncomfortable the way I did in that house. Only one creepy thing actually ever happened to me there though, and this is it. Last year, 32-week pregnant me went back up to see my grandmother before I had this baby, and I was staying with my parents, but my dad was traveling for work, so it was just my mom, my sister, and me. My mom had gone to the grocery store and I was lying on the sofa. The way the living room is set up, you can see the reflection of the bottom 2 feet of the foyer and staircase in the TV, and also the kitchen on the other side of the living room. So I'm lying there messing around with my phone, and I hear the stairs creaking. I look up at the reflection in the TV and I see a pair of bare feet standing in the foyer. I think it's my sister, so I tell her to come and sit with me and feel then baby kicking. There's no reply and the feet turn and walk towards the kitchen. So I sit up to say hey, and there's no one there. At all. My sister wasn't even home, she'd gone to work. My parents have moved closer now and they're closing the sale of that house at the end of this month. They're a little sad, but I'm relieved.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more.